They say good design is obvious, but great design is transparent. We're pursuing perfect hotel design wherever we can find it. That means speaking to the brightest minds in the hospitality industry. This is the Hotel Design Podcast. Hey everyone, Glenn here. Listen, these days it's all about LVT, right? Luxury vinyl tile. It's the number one choice in guest rooms for a lot of reasons, but of course, cleanliness and good air quality, particularly now because there's such a heightened emphasis on being clean. Now, my good friends over at Porcelanosa, they've been offering link floor for a really long time now, and it's a high quality LVT solution with the most incredible sound absorption I've ever not heard, right? So you got the cleanliness aspect, you got the sound absorption aspect. Now, to prove that, I had a chance to visit the architectural lab called Intertech in York, Pennsylvania, and I witnessed it myself. Porcelanosa, they've done the research to keep a guest rooms quiet. Plus, you'll have the assurance of passing relevant building codes and creating an environment of cleanliness you know is so important. Please go to porcelanosa.com and learn more. Then click on that link floor tab or drop us a line over here, info@thehoteldesignpodcast.com. That's info@hoteldesignpodcast.com. Let them know Glenn sent you. Thanks. Hey, everybody. Glenn Haussman here with another episode of the Hotel Design Podcast. But truth is, you already know that because you hit play on this. You saw what's going to be going on. And I'm excited today because I get to talk to the one and only Malcolm Berg, who is with EOA Group, of course. And what's really cool about Malcolm is we got ourselves a Designer of the Year over here. That's right, over the Gold Key Awards. He was given Designer of the Year, and we got him right here. We got him right now. Boom, there he is. Malcolm, so great to see you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you too.
So I think we got to start with this Designer of the Year thing. How freaking cool is that for you personally? And what does it mean for you professionally to be recognized in front of your peers like this?
So I got to tell you, I got a letter in the mail, and I opened up the letter and I started reading it. I'm reading it over and over again. I'm like, no, there's got to be a typo here.
Right.
I literally read it about 4 times, and I showed my wife, and I had her read it and said, is this really saying what I think it's saying?
Right.
And she said, I think it is. It is humbling beyond words, to be brutally honest. I mean, I look at the cast of characters that has been sort of indoctrinated into that little arena, and they're all sort of amazing designers. So I honestly, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I'm humbled. I'm super grateful, and it is what it is. It kind of came and went, and extremely grateful for it. But it feels like it feels like it was an ephemeral little gift, but beautiful nonetheless.
That's a great word for it, ephemeral, because it's just in the moment. It kind of passes and then fades into the ether. But you're going to still be here for years doing great design. I think the best place to start is, how did you get into this business, and what is it that turns you on so much about creating great spaces for people to relax and hang out and enjoy themselves?
Wow, 2 big questions. So how did I get into the business? I started many years ago. My background is in architecture. Went to graduate school for architecture, undergrad architecture, worked as an architect for years and years and years. And I came to South Florida probably about 20 years ago now, as an architect working for a global architecture and interior design firm. Started taking on interior design teams, under my umbrella. I realized there was sometimes a bit of a rift between the architects and the interior designers, and trying to bring them back together. In graduate school, I was actually, I became a little disillusioned in architecture by itself, just architecture per se. Right. And I tried to find something else that would kind of fill the gap. We were designing buildings, but I felt like they were devoid of context and substance and meaning. And long story short, I found meaning in landscape architecture. Went across the aisle, shook hands with the landscape architecture team, and said, "Hey, can I get a thesis advisor from both sides of the aisle? I want one that's a landscape architecture thesis advisor, and another one that's an architecture thesis advisor." They said, "Sure." So I did a dual thesis. It was called Grounding Boundaries, basically a play on words on the dissolution of boundaries between architecture and landscape architecture. So at this point, many years later, I was working as an architect in this firm, taking care of architecture teams, interior design teams, and then
Mhm.
starting to do a lot of landscape design as well, coordination. And I said, someday I'm going to start my own company that brings them all together. That's how I got into hospitality. I started doing hospitality where I was doing interiors,
Mhm.
architecture, and a little bit of landscape. And I realized actually hospitality was, of all the fields that I had done residential, commercial, a little bit of everything. And I realized hospitality was the toughest one. You gotta know your shit. You gotta
Interesting.
do your thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't, they'll call you out on it. You can't walk into a room and pretend to know what you're doing. You really have to
Wait, wait,
to
wait.
know your
I've been doing
business.
that my whole career. Am I doing something wrong over there? But Malcolm, you
Hey.
make a great point, man, because you really have to be on it and you have to kind of put yourself out there in a way, in a real intimate way when it comes to doing design, right? And if you're not doing it right and people call on you, that could be pretty painful if you're called out on that, right? So how do you make sure that you're always crushing it and don't put yourself into that position? And maybe you learned a lesson along the way too.
The term crushing it, it's I don't think we're always looking to crush it. I think
Hmm.
we're always trying to do the right thing in the realm, sort of in the arena in which we're playing, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if we're doing, hospitality design and basically your end goal, I'm not designing your living room. I'm not designing my living room. I'm not designing my
Right.
client's living room or anybody else's for that matter. I'm trying to design something that's bespoke, something that is of the
Hmm.
site, something that's
Right.
specific to the client, the brand, the location, the demographics, the neighborhood, the general manager, the maitre d', so whoever.
Hmm.
So once we get all those factors in line and we're basically designing for all of them, that's when we crush it because we're basically poking a whole bunch of holes into the vessel and filling those holes before we give the project back
Right.
to the group. Once we've done that, I think that we've crushed it because that means that it's going to be successful to all the parties that are involved.
Right. And that's a great approach to take right there. You know, you really need to make sure the stakeholders are involved and all of that kind of stuff. There's one thing I'm not sure I agree with you though, because behind me, this is my living room, and it looks like you designed it. Just kidding. For those of you on the audio feed, I've got a photograph of one of his great projects out there, the JW Marriott, Marco Island. So when you're approaching a design, what are you thinking about? What is most important? How do you engage the stakeholders in order to bring their vision to life, but through your eyes?
I think that kind of going back to what I said before is is
Yeah.
is trying to find something that they don't know they don't have.
Right.
I don't like to compete. I don't like to compete in a level playing field. I don't like to go out and see, okay,
Right.
what does everybody else have? How can we make it a little bit better? I think that's the fallacy. That's the panacea. You're looking for something that doesn't that will never make you extraordinary, and not extraordinary as in amazing, but extraordinary. A little bit away from
Yep.
from the crowd of sheep. So I don't spend a tremendous amount of time looking at magazines. I don't spend a tremendous amount of time
Right.
seeing what other people have done because that kind of it tends to poison the well a little bit.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
what I try to find is what they need, even if they don't know they need it.
Hmm.
How do I skin the cat in a different way? What are the little golden nuggets that they have that they never realized they had? The most beautiful things come out when you start emphasizing the imperfection. When you look at beauty in things that are patinaed or
Right.
eroded or worn or tangential or uncommonly found. And that's what we look for. We look for things that they didn't know they had. How do we make something extraordinary out of something that they might have been seeing every day?
All right. So if you
That's kind of our aim.
avoid, right, okay. So Malcolm, if you avoid reading all of those publications that could
Mhm.
infiltrate your mind, right? So where do you find inspiration? How do you continue to expand your design dialogue that you want to partake in with your guests and audience that stays in your properties, yeah, in the places that you've designed and created?
I wish I could tell you there was some funny tobacco that I managed to indulge in that would make it a lot easier. But
Well, I got some, but it may not help you with that.
it does. It just doesn't help. I mean, it's fun and all, but it doesn't help in that arena.
Right.
So I think it's a guttural process. It's really, it truly is a guttural process where you sit down and you start thinking about what factors influence the property, what factors influence the guest. Or the owner, what is important, right? And if you can start extracting sort of those important factors, start distilling those into something that's much more essential, and then you find that DNA in the property, sort of the genius of the site. That's sort of that golden nugget that we keep looking for.
Right.
If we can find that and tap into it, then design is easy. It's never a question of, do I like pink or green or blue or yellow. It's a matter of, does the design follow the DNA that we're establishing? So that's honestly the hardest part. I mean, we break down our design process to one more phase, which is concept design. We start with concept design, then we get into schematic. And the reason we do concept is that sort of lowercase b branding element, where you're really branding the property at a different level. You're not branding it at the brand. You're not branding it at the uppercase B, where you're doing collateral yet and figuring all that out. You're really trying to understand what the property wants to be when it grows up. What is the personality? And if we can establish that personality early on, then the rest of it literally is extremely objective. It's not a subjective exercise. It literally is sequential. It just follows naturally.
All right. So if the property wants to be something, how do you hear what it's saying to translate that into that visual style that you're looking to achieve?
So the property has to want to be something authentically and organically. The property cannot be something contrived. If the property is trying to sort of assume an identity that's not it or its own, I will call them up on it. And I basically say, guys, I'll call them out on it. I'll tell you, you're trying to be something you're not. Why try to pretend? Why not just be authentic to yourself and allow that to permeate? And I will literally take a detour. I will tell them, hey, this is much more like who you are, what your audience is seeking, what will make you successful. My entire goal is to make that property successful. Because if I can make that property successful, fiscally successful, emotionally successful, sensorially, if the whole thing becomes a really kind of sort of cinematic money-making venue for everybody involved, then we've got something. But it's got to be authentic. It's got to be real and ingrained, and it's got to permeate and it's got to last. It cannot be just a flash in the pan. Hey, look at our identity. It follows suit what everybody else is doing. Have fun. Boom, it's gone. It's got to be there a while later and carry on.
Yeah, one of the problems I've seen with certain designs out there is they try to go so far ahead of where we might be. They look amazing, but then a year later you go back and they just don't feel right. They don't look right. It doesn't have that sense of authenticity to it, which I think is really what creates the undertone that allows a property to live and breathe when it's authentic. But I gotta ask you, and let's take a look at some of your. Well, before we get to that, I'm sorry. One of the cornerstones that you focus on is what you call empathetic design. What does that really mean to you, and how does it express yourself in the projects that you focus upon?
If you start looking at sort of the premise of empathy, understanding empathy and what empathy, at least what it means to me, I don't know what the Webster's definition is, but if I start looking at empathy, it means, putting yourself in the shoes of, right? Trying to understand the position of the other. And I kind of touched on it a little while ago in understanding it's not just about us being good people. I think my team is amazing, by the way. Every shout out to my team at EOA. They're just amazing human beings, and we hire amazing human beings that are just emotionally invested, and then we continue to train them to become amazing professionals. But the first and most important element is them being able to sort of assimilate with drink the Kool-Aid, essentially understand what it is that we're looking for. And what we're looking for is to make sure that we do right for the client, do right for the property. Even when they don't think that we're doing right for them, we are actually pushing in the right direction. So empathetic design to me is kind of like what I had talked about before, understanding what a property and a client really, truly needs, and very slowly, very quietly, very subtly engaging the client to make them understand what we think they need. And if they drink the Kool-Aid with us, it is a long-lasting relationship. And that empathetic design is what leads us to them coming back to us and say, hey, let's do it again. Because it's not that you did what I asked you to do, it's that you did what we needed to do. So empathetic design is really understanding what the needs are. And like I said, from the valet at the entrance to the housekeeper to the bartender, it's getting everybody's brain, everybody's needs involved, all the way down back to the guest and heads on beds. And if we can fill those needs in a beautiful way, and if we can make people happy doing so, right? I always think about what a successful property means to me. If I can get a guest and an owner to come into a space and look at the space and kind of go, holy shit, and tilt their head sideways, wondering how we got away with that, and then smiling and then say, wow, that's pretty cool, right? Because they start to internalize and rationalize and digest the information that we've given them, and it resonates positively. And if we can do that, that's empathetic design gone well.
Could you give me an example of something specific that you've done? You don't have to say any names or properties or something like that, where you got the ownership, the people paying the bills, to really understand that what you felt they need is really what they should need.
So, it's funny you should mention that. In that property where you are right now, you just pulled up this property kind of at random just before the...
I know, and I'll just give everyone a chance to look at it. Go ahead, keep talking.
Well, it's funny because this is an old property. It's a property that used to be just a regular Marriott, and they asked me, hey, we need to take it away from looking like an alpine village, because the fact is it was conceived as a Balinese resort, but never quite made it through. So this goes back, 10 years or so. And I was in the lobby lounge, which is behind you and to my right. And that was the first project that I did with this property. And that lobby lounge required a lot of moves, a lot of big moves that they didn't really want to take on. And when I proposed it, I remember talking to one of the managers at Marriott saying, Malcolm, you've taken it too far. These ribbed ceilings and the curves in the ceilings, we don't do that. This is a more conventional property, tone it down in a second. And I basically said, give me a chance to show you that this is going to be a successful product. It's going to be an icon in the lobby. People are going to see it. They're going to walk in. They're going to flock into a space which they normally would have otherwise avoided. And we're going to move the bar, by the way. It's going to be expensive. We're going to move the bar from this side to that side. So thinking about it much more from an operational standpoint, from a line of sight and connectivity and symbiosis of spaces and privacy in public, finding a good private spot in a public space. How do we get all those elements really aligned, truly and authentically and organically? And we did that, and we pushed it as hard as we could. They paid more money than they expected for that particular renovation. When they called me back in the middle of the night one night, the director of food and beverage, and said, Malcolm, you won't believe it, but today, and this is a month into the renovation having taken place, we are tenfold the revenue generation that we had prior to the renovation. Tenfold. Wow. Now, the actual number tapered down over a long time, down to about fourfold. But even that, I mean, the ROI on the renovation was spectacular. That wasn't initially my intent. I mean, I didn't go with the mindset of, hey, let's make money. The mindset was, let's make an amazing experience that works well for all involved. And it works. That is a successful outcome.
And I'll tell you, Malcolm, the property looks extremely memorable from some of the pictures I've seen. Now, there are other properties within that same family that look great, but I don't make an emotional connection to them. They seem to have a fungibility to them. It could be in any hotel brand, anywhere. And that doesn't make me want to stay and spend extra money on drinks. It makes me just say, oh, I've been here. I've had this experience before, even if I've never stayed in the property. And then I go out somewhere else. This design makes me want to stay there. It feels warm. It feels open. It feels like a big hug is really what it does. And I can see wanting to spend money there. Well, listen, I need lots of hugs, and I'm going to try to get them any way I can. Right. All right. So let's take a look at the Bacardi Ocho lounge over here. Where is this located exactly now?
So this is in Miami. This is the lounge that we did for the Bacardi, obviously the rum company. Yep. It is the VIP lounge in the American Airlines arena. Oddly enough, we were installing the lighting, and I don't know if you can pan down a little bit to see. Oh, that's the
I
next project.
sure
So
can.
the lighting in this one, now this is the next project. The lighting in this one was really quite spectacular. In the ceiling, we did all these tendrils in the ceiling that
Right.
came down and wrapped around these columns. But this is a VIP lounge looking down into the arena itself. So basically, you pay a membership fee, you go up to this lounge, they give you drinks, and you can look into the arena from the
Wow.
upper or clearest story of the property. Unfortunately, it shut down literally when the pandemic opened up,
Right, of course.
because all the arena shut down. And
Right.
we were installing the lighting. And when we were installing the lighting, we found out that it was the arena was shut down, and we couldn't figure out why. And then they told us after we left that there had been a major outbreak in the arena, and we've been there for a few days installing lighting in a place where
Oh boy.
we realized was a hot zone. So it was fun, but it's a gorgeous place. Obviously, right now it's opening back up, and it's very successful. The client was very happy, and it looks really quite beautiful.
So what, when you're trying to put together all of these elements, how are you thinking about that? Because you need to kind of have that Bacardi vibe branding kind of feel to it. So how do you get to understand what a brand is? Essentially, its nuances, it's all of that stuff, in order to be able to have that play out in a visual context as well.
It's really understanding the brand. I mean, you do a lot of talking, well, a lot of listening. Let me rephrase that.
Yes,
You do a ton of listening. You ask a lot of questions. I mean, the whole notion of empathy is trying to understand, put yourself in the brain of everybody else. So asking a lot of questions as to what it means to them. What does the party mean? 8th Street, the Cuban influence, the drinks, the rum, the number 8, the lines in the ceiling, the squiggly. So it's really about that beautiful sort of golden color, the rum, and just it's a very very emotional sort of feeling for the lounge itself. Very personal too. It's about a lounge. It's about people settling and talking, looking at each other. People don't go to a bar to drink. People go to a bar to see other people with a drink in hand.
That's right.
That's pretty much how we think about these things.
Now, for me, it really connotes that kind of rum type of feeling. It looks like what we're looking at, the bar or table over there feels to me like rum barrels, or it has the essence of rum barrels to it, and all the colors seem to play into that kind of thing. Am I right about that?
You're 100% right.
Guy?
And it goes 100% right. It goes back to the whole notion of hand craftsmanship. Hand hewing wood and shaping it into the barrels, putting it all together, and really fitting sort of a tight seal with wood and craftsmanship and hand hewing the wood. It's just a beautiful, emotional connection.
Yeah, that is absolutely beautiful. All right, let's take a look at another one. What project are we looking at here? I see an alligator. I see like a living kind of space over there, and it looks pretty cool. So where is this?
So this is the Ben Hotel in West Palm Beach. So I mean, I know I'm a little biased, but super cool property, guys. If you have a chance to go see it, definitely go see it. And it's got a ton. You're not going to be bored. Once you walk in, I keep talking about cinematic passage through space, and we coined the term path as destination everywhere you go, and all that kind of stuff. This has an amazing story behind it. The branding behind it basically goes back to a bed and breakfast that used to reside in the area called the Ben Trovato. And the Ben Trovato, if you look up Ben Trovato in Italian, I'm going to butcher it, so I apologize. But it's "Se non è vero, ma ben trovato." So it's not really true, but it's a story well told.
Right.
In other words, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
I love that.
So when we thought about the Ben Trovato, which was this bed and breakfast in the vicinity of where this new hotel was erected, we thought about the fact that it was frontier land at the time. And, you're talking pre-electricity, the trains were just barely coming down, and it's not like we had cell phones to communicate or fast cars to take us down.
Right. When you said frontier land, I thought maybe the Country Bear Jamboree was playing over there or something like that.
Possibly.
Little Disney joke there for you people.
Right, so we're surrounded by snakes and alligators and toothy creatures that might bite you, and but the owners there, they were dressed in clothing as they had come down from Chicago. She had this beautiful hat with feathers on it, and she would dress beautifully and impeccably to come to dinner. So we started to think about the story of who the people that had been invited to this hotel might have been, and how they would have been greeted. And we thought about, Ben Trovato, we narrowed it down to Ben, and Ben is essentially this character that when you arrive, you might see him, coming in wading through the marshes with tall
Right.
leather boots and a shotgun under his arm and covered in mud, and walks into the bed and breakfast and takes off to his room and takes a shower, cleans up, and then comes back to dinner impeccably dressed. And he can tell
Hmm.
you the stories of what he saw in the frontier and the animals that he fought or caught or killed or whatever. And those stories can be pretty amazing to someone that doesn't come from the area. So therefore, the alligator comes in and all the
Hmm.
accessories, that come into play in this property. But chock full of moments as you walk through the property
Right.
that really kind of saturate the experience.
All right. So I want to talk about moments. How do you think about creating individualized moments? And I say this for two reasons. Number one, I think it makes the place more engaging, but we're also in the age of Instagram and sharing photos and social media and all of that. So all of that has to come together for you in a seamless, logical sort of a way.
Yeah, and it's a slippery slope to think of Instagrammable, because one of the worst things that I can
Mm,
think of
mm,
is making a space to be an Instagrammable moment.
right.
To me, the notion of creating a prop where people can sit in front of, take photographs, and post them is shallow at best, because that means that you're focusing only on that single little
Right.
fallacy, or that single little lie.
Right. And
Um,
might I add, probably distracts you from the overall energy of the property that you're trying to create. Takes it away from that authenticity as well, right?
100%, 100%. So, to me, if we engage a space, we're going to engage it holistically. Think
Right.
about the entire space, and when you sit in the space and you look around, and no matter where you look, no matter where you're sitting, if you're feeling comfortable and engaged emotionally, even from a brain standpoint, if it's engaging
Right.
your brain in any way, shape, or form, then we're doing something correctly. If you're looking off in the distance and you're seeing people with a camera taking photographs of themselves, it just becomes very much a one-liner. So
Hmm.
to answer your question, we think much more organically, we think much more cinematically. We don't think about static elevations. We think very much about three-dimensional spaces and how they engage each other. We think symbiotically. How do we get the symbiosis between one
Right.
space and the next? How does one space literally feed off the next? So if you have one person sitting over there and one person sitting over here, we're still having a dialogue. If you have one object
Right.
over there and one object over here, we're still having a dialogue. If you have
Right.
light over there, but you don't have it over here, you will have the perceived light in your dark space. So it's very much about I wouldn't call it a cacophony, but definitely a saturated room of dialogue.
Yes. But also, you do have achieved people wanting to take photographs of the space, or at least that's my perception of it, because I would love to take a picture with that alligator, for example. And there are other moments in there that I'd like to capture for memories. But what you're saying is that it kind of has to be, it has to be a part that comes out naturally throughout the process, as opposed to trying to force it to happen. And if you
You
force
know,
it to
the
happen,
the
it
the,
takes away from everything.
the best compliments you can ever receive are the unsolicited compliments. The
Right.
best photographs I could ever enjoy are the ones that I never imagined would be the photograph that they would have chosen. So
Right.
if they choose a moment in the property that they find really amazing, and we never said to ourselves, "Boy, that's going to be photographed," that's that's
Hmm.
that's a great accomplishment for the entire design team, because that means that they've
Right.
done so many things right for so many people. The world is flat. Everybody has their own aspirations. Everybody has their own likes and their own draws. If you
Hmm.
can find a space that has so many of them that everybody finds their own, proper temperature of the porridge, then we've done something correctly.
Right. I'm always striving for getting that porridge just right, but I get it too hot or too cold all the time here, Malcolm. I don't know what my problem is. I'm curious as to what you said, path as destination. I've never heard that term before. What does it mean to you, and how does it inform you and your decisions?
Going back to the whole notion of thinking a little bit more holistically,
Hmm.
not just, we do architecture, we do interior design, we do landscape design, we do branding,
Right.
we do a little bit of
Master
everything, but we don't
planning.
master planning, but we don't just do one. Even when we do one at a time, we're always thinking about the other ones as well. The
Hmm.
reason for that is I want to make sure that we don't go into design with blinders on. This is my
Right.
job. I'm staying within the lines of my friends.
Right.
I want to do a job that it sounds totally redundant, empathetically brings in the other disciplines and allows
Right.
the other disciplines to have
Right.
space to talk, right? To again, to dialogue. So
Hmm.
as we're talking about the path, whether it is the sense of arrival coming into the property, getting out of the car, talking to to the valet, talking to the concierge, walking through the doors, any moment, any moment whatsoever where you're cinematically walking through the property, you should be able to stop. And I kind of challenge myself and stop and look around and see, what do I see? Does it fulfill me in any way, shape? Does it touch me? Does it reach me in any way, shape, or form? And where the path itself becomes a destination, as opposed to the opposite, which is the postcard image at the end of the hallway. That's a
Right.
beautiful snapshot that you have to trudge through the entire way. Basically, the same notion as, what we do is what we love. They say if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
Hmm.
Exactly the same transfers to what we do every day. We love what we do. We don't
Fascinating.
just wait for the accolades at the end of the project. At the actual engagement with the client, the feedback that we get from the client, the feedback that we get from the guests as they walk the property, that
Hmm.
is the reward, and it's really amazingly rewarding.
Right. All right. So here's something that just occurred to me. If you're working on a project, a lot of times, especially if it's a massive, massive like mega resort or something like that, you'll be doing a single component of it, right? So how do you make sure what other firms are doing really, complements what you're doing, and you don't create a cacophony in the negative sense of
Right,
visuals?
right. You know, that's a real tough one, because for that one you need the support of the client.
Right.
Entirely, completely, you need the support of the client. The client needs to be aware of sort of the perils of duplication of efforts, the
Hmm.
perils of lack of coordination between the
Hmm.
design teams.
Hmm.
And if they're aware of that and they're a savvy client, they will bring the teams together in dialogue. I
Hmm.
think that the most important thing in a property is establishing the DNA. If you can establish the DNA, everybody drinks the Kool-Aid.
Right.
Everybody understands what the basic language is. Once we understand the basic language, you can divert. You can take off little pieces of the same,
Hmm.
sonata and kind of
Right.
run on your own side, but make sure that it still engages. It might be a completely different instrument, but you're
Right.
still engaging. I think that that's what's really, really important. And understand what the master principle is, what the master concept is, what the
Right.
DNA is. Once you do that, you can fit in perfectly.
All right. So using that DNA as a place for me to understand what you're talking about, it's kind of like I'm an only child, but if I had a number of siblings, we're all different, but we're kind of alike. And theoretically, because we come from the same place, we all kind of complement each other in a particular sort of way. So it's kind of like that familial thing. You could all have different expressions of personality and looks, but it's all kind of in the same programming at the end of the day, right?
And I think, once you establish the language, once you establish the sheet of music, we're all on the same team. We all have the
Right.
same goalposts. We understand where we're going. So we're not. I always use the analogy. I used to play rugby. We used to play the analogy of the scrum, where everybody
Hmm.
goes down or pushes in the same direction. As
Right.
long as we know where we need to take the ball, we're going to take the ball there together.
Right.
Even if one pushes with the right leg and one pushes with the left leg, it really doesn't matter, because we're going in the same direction. So. Um, yeah, it's
That's
understanding
awesome.
the sheet of music.
Well, let's take a look at this. What project are we looking at here, sir?
This is the Peregrine. This is the
In
Peregrine
Omaha?
Curio Collection Hotel, by Curio by Hilton in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. I thought it was. I didn't want to be so bold as to say it, but
that's
this
that's
is
that's
managed by Chesapeake Hospitality, and Chris Green, the CEO over there, is a big friend of
good,
our
man.
No Vacancy Live show.
You actually pegged it. So awesome project. I got to tell you, from the beginning, just a great team, great ownership
Hmm.
group, the design team, in our office, just a beautiful project. It goes back to, we looked into the history of the property. You keep asking, where are we pulling, our own little semblance of DNA for the
Hmm.
properties. And when we looked at this property, it used to be a bank, right
Right.
downtown, in the middle of downtown, right next to City Hall. Very
Hmm.
odd place potentially for a hotel, but it used to
Right.
be a bank, self-referential, totally
Hey,
closed
check
in.
it
It had
out.
a party wall right next to it that led to another property.
Hmm.
So it only had three walls that led to the outside. Very odd.
Right.
But we found some imagery of the bank. It
Hmm.
had a peregrine falcon sculpture in the middle of the bank as you walked into the bank itself. Looking into the history of the peregrine, of the falcon itself, we realized that there was a peregrine falcon family roosting on the roof of the bank.
Right.
And they took a liking to this Peregrine family, and basically erected the sculpture in the bank. The bank was not called Peregrine, but it was in homage of that Peregrine. So we found the soul of the property in that Peregrine, and we realized that the property had to go through a certain amount of demolition to grow back into a hotel. In that demolition, we saw that the pieces of concrete come down and become a bit of a wasteland for a little while, kind of like a rebirth of the property. And that wasteland became a great place for pigeons and birds and things to roost. And it's a great place for a peregrine falcon to reemerge and come back and find its roosting place and its hunting grounds. So the peregrine really became the rallying cry, the soul of the property. And we looked at the peregrine not just as a bird, but as an incredibly, as an amazing bird that flies from great heights at great speeds, an amazing hunter, and an incredible relationship that the peregrine has always had with humankind, going back millennia of training peregrines to actually hunt for human beings. And when the peregrine comes back with the animal, the human actually feeds it. So it's again, a beautifully symbiotic and personal relationship. So everything within the property became homage, an ode to the peregrine falcon and the relationship we have with the human beings.
So then I've got to ask, how do some of these specific design elements reflect that? I mean, I look at it and I go, this is a place I want to hang out in. And I've been talking to Chris about getting to Omaha for way too long now since it opened, but I don't understand why it works. Why do all of these different textures and colors and all of that come together to create something that has this incredible free flow to it?
So very difficult property to engage, and I love this, by the way. The tougher the property, the more interesting the outcome, right? The more
and when you mean tougher the property, you mean the bones and stuff that it has, what you're working
the
with.
Bones that it had and the bones that it didn't quite yet have.
Right.
One of the tough nuts to crack is if you have a property that only has three sides that have windows, how do you make it into a full surround, twin loaded corridors and all that, double-sided corridors and all that kind of stuff. So we really had to crack a very, very tough nut. A lot of it had to do with topography. The topography outside kind of changes. So the interiors had to change in scale and movement, vertical movement, lateral movement, etc. So we really kind of went back to what the peregrine meant. We looked at the breastplate of the peregrine and the beautiful feathers in the breastplate and the coloration, the golden tones that came out of the breastplate and the feathers, and all the golden tones came back and reflected themselves in the decor.
All right,
wood
that
tones,
makes
leather
sense
tones,
to
etc.
me.
Yeah, very, very, very strong and palpable.
Right, so you're actually able to use some of the natural elements of the animal into informing you about color, shape, texture, form, that sort of a thing.
Absolutely, and a lot of it obviously is sort of an evolved story of the animal itself and the relationship, and a lot of it becomes, for example, the image on the right hand side below the P is sort of these abstracted feathers overlapping each other, kind of like a beautiful suit of armor. So these things kind of evolve. In the restaurant, we have this ceiling that has sort of a nest where lights kind of come down from this nest elements. All of it kind of goes back to the peregrine falcon influence on what we do here.
That is super interesting. So I want to look at one more project, Malcolm. What are we looking at over here?
So this is actually part of the JW that you looked at previously, the one with the cathedral that was hugging you.
Yep.
This is it's a very large property. It's about I think it's about 810 keys at this point, something like that. Wow. And this is one of the rooftop restaurants. This is the Tesoro restaurant, which is the rooftop restaurant, and the property leads off to the adult pool. It has a beautiful wraparound terrace, looking at the Gulf of Mexico, the setting sun in the west.
Yeah, I want to have some dinner at that outdoor seating there right now.
Yeah, it's a pretty spectacular sunset. I mean, when that sun sets, people clap at the beach because it's just so gorgeous.
Yeah,
it's really quite amazing.
All right, so what's with this, the structure that's part of this ceiling? I don't quite understand that, but it looks really cool. It almost is kind of like, and again, I'm coming out of nowhere, but you're on an island. It feels like land and going into sea or something like that to me.
Well, you and I did not coordinate on this narrative. So yeah, you kind of nailed it. The story behind Tesoro is that of the Ring of Fire. The whole notion of land being created from molten lava coming from the depths of the earth, and the idea of sort of tectonic plates kind of bumping underground. These tectonic plates that have immense pressure. And when they come together and create sort of these fissures in the ground, they have ramifications and repercussions, and earthquakes and major sort of cataclysmic events come from these shifting of plates underground. And as these plates shift and kind of come together underground, they kind of collapse into each other and crunch. Right. So this is that beautiful sort of cataclysmic moment where they crunch and create that friction and sort of perpetuate that heat that is coming from the core of the earth, and the heat actually erupts and comes through sort of these lava channels out of the earth into the ocean, cools down as it hits the ocean, and in the relationship between the cooling of the ocean, the cooling waters, and the lava, new earth is created. And it really is about sort of the ring of island that kind of created from this molten lava hitting the water, and then becoming some of the most fertile lands imaginable. So that you're talking about the Hawaiis and all these lands where first ferns come out of the ground as all these minerals are brought out of the earth, and then trees, and then landscapes, and over millennia they become unbelievably lush paradises. So that's what this is talking about, sort of the inception point, the moment, that cataclysmic moment where the land masses kind of hit each other, grind, and kind of explode into this amazing beauty.
Very sophisticated idea. That comes from all of those extension conversations and listening, is my guess.
This comes from a property looking for an identity having to do with sort of Balinese and the whole notion of sort of these islands. I mean, the property was always called an island within an island. So we started thinking about how the island could have been created in the first place, and what a Balinese island would mean, and what that point of inception for the Balinese island would mean. And that's really where this kind of, got extracted from.
That's pretty.
So
that's pretty wild.
We created this abstract ceiling, very complex geometry in the ceiling, very, very difficult to accomplish, and we did it sort of three-dimensionally with computer graphics, and it was definitely a challenge, but we got it done.
Wow, that is absolutely cool. So, is it the secret to design? Just kind of a lot of work goes into it, but it kind of doesn't feel like it is, and it should just be seamless and it feel like it's been there forever.
One of the secrets of going to watch a ballet is don't sit too close, because when you sit too close to the dancers, every time they hit the stage, it sounds like a massive thump. It sounds like a brick just hit the table. But if you sit far back enough and you see it, it looks like this beautiful, just again, ethereal dance, right? It's just they seem to levitate. One of the tricks of our trade is making sure that whatever the outcome is, that people don't understand the tenacity that it takes to get that accomplished. And the rubber meets the road with us, not in just ideating, but actually accomplishing. And accomplishing comes all the way from coming up with the idea, rendering the idea, presenting the idea, convincing the client that the idea is a good idea, convincing the contractor that the idea is a good idea, developing the documentation that corroborates that thought, and making sure that the documentation is diligent enough and proper to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Coming up with ideas seems a lot easier than it actually is. Getting them executed further compounds that problem. This very much was one of those exercises when we presented this to the client loved it, brand loved it, everybody's in their blissful heaven of, yeah, this is going to happen. A few months prior to the building opening up, the building was constructed, everything was done. We kept asking for shop drawings on the ceiling component. And the contractor came out and said flat out in a meeting, and it was a massive bomb that they dropped. They said, we're not going to do shop drawings. And they said, what do you mean you're not going to do shop drawings? And they said from the client, we're not going to try to do shop drawings of something that cannot be built.
Right.
And I said, well, hold on a second. We know it can be built. We drew it. We figured it out. We've shown you how to do it. They're like, we actually looked at it ourselves in 3D and we can't do it. I said, well, look, make a mock-up. I'll walk you through the mock-up and we'll figure it out together. They said, we're not going to make a mock-up of something that cannot be done. So I get back in my car. I'm driving back from Marco Island. I'm brewing.
Right.
I'm thinking, my God, I can't believe they basically made us look like we presented something that was a house of cards to the client. So I called my office and I said, send me the drawings, print them, send them to my house. They sent me the stuff to my house. I went into the garage and spent hours that weekend building a 6-foot by 4-foot full-scale mock-up of that section.
Wow.
Not only did we build it, I actually, as I built it, I'm out there with the planer and all the tools, getting it done in the wood shop. I recorded every section of it, how I was going to get built, what the substrate was going to look like, how the pieces were thinned out and bent and stapled into place. And I created a PowerPoint and a video presentation. And in the next meeting, I showed them exactly how it was going to be done. And at that point, they stopped. Not a word was said. And the next meeting we had was at the shop with the pieces already laid out. So it's very hard, guys. It's very hard to just design something and say, hey, I came up with it. Let's make it happen.
Right.
Getting it to the finish line is really, really, really difficult.
Yeah, that is awesome and a good place to end up. But Malcolm, how do people learn more about you? How do people find you?
EOAgroup.com. I guess MalcolmBerg.com, EOAgroup.com. We're easy to find. But thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Super appreciate your support. Gold Key, HD, all of those guys as well for the Designer of the Year award. That was unbelievable, and we're honored and grateful and super appreciative. So thank
Beautiful.
you. And shout out to my team as well. I mean, love you guys. Tremendous.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the Hotel Design Podcast. Now, remember, design is so much harder than it looks to make it look easy, right? So much work goes into executing. There's so much homework that goes into these projects, so much conversation, so much alignment, so much of understanding the story, all to make it seem effortless. Now, remember, you can dream, but if you can't bring it to reality, then what's the point? Thank you so much for watching today. We've got so many great shows coming up. You won't want to miss it. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page and our audio version of this show as well. I'm Glenn Haussman. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right back here on the Hotel Design Podcast.